Hello, everyone. It is good to see you all. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as eSoup, and today we are reading chapters 162 to 167. And we left off on a bit of a, at least sort of an emotional cliffhanger. Like, it was a weird kind of cliffhanger, because it's not like bad things were about to happen, and very much the opposite. But it was just like, oh, Shenza Chuan and Xiaoqie, like, are reunited again. And then it was like, okay, bye, time to end the stream. And it hurt. It pained me to do that. But I'm so glad that was a Monday stream and not, like, today's stream where we actually have to wait until next week. That would have been a lot. Hi Lon Jade, I'm glad you could catch up. Hi Vase. Hi Blue. Hi Nina. Blue, after however many months, my poor boys. See, I misunderstood that the message was saying that Shenza Chuan needed to come there for the winter market. But I realized afterward, I was like, oh, it was saying that we need to discuss something about the winter market, so you need to come here right now. I realized that afterwards. I was like, oh, that's probably what that meant. Yeah. So also next week, I'm going to be out of town, on Monday. And so next week I'm streaming first on Wednesday at the regular time. And then I'm going to stream again on Saturday, also at the regular time, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, just to stay caught up. And because I have a free Saturday, so I can actually do that. So just so y'all know, I mean, you'll see the notifications for the streams and stuff, but yeah. So it's gonna be fun waiting for that Wednesday stream. Anyway, as always, please give the stream a like. And I am so excited to see what happens. I'm going to get started. The end of the last chapter was so beautiful, too. We are on page 167 for chapter 162, Trade Market. Oh my god, what a first line. The deep blue dome of heaven spread out behind Shenza Chuan. He removed his cloak, exposing the earring on his right ear as he lifted his arms. His robe's cuffs slid down to reveal the secured, snow-white sleeves of his inner garment. He was a white bird, touching down for a rest in the still and silent world, commanding all of Xiaoqie's attention in an instant. This is... this is where I do the Britney thing and slam the book on something, except I don't want to slam my book on anything, so I'm just gonna do it in spirit. Xiaoqie didn't even blink. He watched Shenza Chuan descend the bank in a few steps, and unthinkingly opened his arms. Shenza Chuan rushed into his embrace. The impact sent him stumbling back half a step. He took this white bird into his bosom, crushing him in a tight hug. The swift-running river crashed into their legs, sending up sprays of water. You scared me. Recovering from his astonishment, Xiaoqie lifted Shenza Chuan high and threw his head back to laugh. You fell from the sky. Shenza Chuan was a little short of breath. I'm here for an inspection. Xiaoqie lifted his hand to Shenza Chuan's cheek, then slid it to the back of Shenza Chuan's head and held him still for a kiss. Dusk closed in on the mountains and waters around them, their lips holding the last warmth of the evening glow. Shenza Chuan's hands came up to cup Xiaoqie's cheeks as he responded passionately. Apparently, thank you, Blue, we get to look at the colored illustration already. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Okay. Wait, let me get my program in the right place so I can see this. Look at them. Look at them. I love the colors in this. It's so pretty. His little white bird. Hi, Wolf. Where are we? Where... Oh, what is happening? Things are falling. I just read the first page of chapter 162. And what a beautiful page it was. The shimmer on the surface of the water faded, and the gathering darkness blurred the boundary between heaven and earth. They clung close, ever so intimate as they unburdened themselves of their desperate loneliness. Xiaoqie kissed him so hard, Shen Zichuan sucked in a breath when they parted, licking the spot nearly torn by Xiaoqie's sharp canines. Inspect away, Xiaoqie laughed. Go on, I've already stripped for you. Draping his arms around Xiaoqie's neck, Shen Zichuan tapped his sturdy back with his dangling fan. I disappeared without a trace the moment I stepped off the carriage. I haven't even met his lordship. I'll inspect you tonight. Aha. Xiaoqie dragged out the word and held Shen Zichuan right where he wanted him. Bitterly, he said, So you're here to see my father. Shen Zichuan swung his folding fan. That's just something I have to do along the way. My heart is all here. Carrying Shen Zichuan, Xiaoqie waded through the water toward the riverbank. I don't believe you. Shen Zichuan felt that Xiaoqie looked especially dashing this way. When Xiaoqie set him down, he leaned back to gaze at him. Xiaoqie placed his palm against Shen Zichuan's forehead and stretched out his arm to put a little distance between them. You should have seized the chance while you had it. Xiaoqie bent down for his clothes. That's all I'm showing you. Then I suppose I'll be leaving, Shen Zichuan teased. Xiaoqie picked up his robe and jerked his chin toward the hill. Go ahead. Shen Zichuan nodded and took a few small steps backward. Seeing that Xiaoqie didn't budge, he turned around in earnest. But before he had taken a full stride forward, Xiaoqie pulled him back, covering his head with the robe, and kissing him until a tingle ran up Shen Zichuan's spine. The wide robe that enveloped them was covered in Xiaoqie's scent, the cool and refreshing fragrance engulfing Shen Zichuan. In the darkness afforded by that thin film of fabric, he revealed his avaricious nature, breathing hotly to seduce Xiaoqie, before finally whispering in his ear, Your father is coming. The group of well-meaning guards who had been squatting tactfully behind the slope started coughing loudly. Xiaoqie pulled back in the nick of time, tearing the robe off them both in a fit of pique. I love their bantering so much. I agree. Wolf, have you seen the art? I was just showing everyone the art, like, probably right before you got here. It's so beautiful. Xiao Fengshu had long known of Shen Zichuan's arrival, but he hadn't communicated this fact to Xiaoqie. Now, why would he not do that? The main tent was crowded with people now. The commanding generals from Base Camp, 2nd Sand Camp, and the Liuyang camps were all present, in the midst of discussing news from the homeland. Hi, Henry. I don't know when you got here, but hello. If the Biansha troops don't withdraw soon, this war will go into the winter. The commanding general of 2nd Sand Camp was a man named Jiang Sheng. He'd been wounded some days back, and his shoulders were still wrapped in gauze. If we're going to keep up our current momentum through the winter, we need to consider deploying more craftsmen to the battalions on the front lines. We can't move fast enough if we have to rely on the supply squadron to deliver fresh equipment every time ours wears down. Deploying more craftsmen is an option. Zuo Qianqiu was warming himself by the fire. But we'll also need to feed them. If we transfer everyone to the front lines, there will be no one back at home to till the fields next spring. Oh yeah, Blue, you said a surprise. Yep, also probably to tease his son. Yeah, no, I can see him doing that. Now that Li Bei had lost access to Juexi's granaries, its provisions were cut in half. They had to rely on the military fields in Libe to survive. The ability to feed their soldiers was something that would determine success or failure in battle. The heir has suggested establishing a new supply camp behind Second Sand Camp, Zhao Hui said. This will allow us to assist border camp to the south and meet the needs of the front lines faster. In times of emergency, our people back home will scrimp and save to supply the front line. Winter is around the corner, and the coats have yet to be distributed. Zhang Sheng knew everyone was in a difficult position. He couldn't push too hard. He frowned in silence for a moment. The heir consort is leading the old and infirm, plus all the women and children, to hasten the production of winter coats back in the homeland. The cotton used to fill them was given to us by Luosha Pass. We're in for a tough time this year. If we can't survive this winter, we can forget about plans for next year. You're a veteran general. Xiao Fengshu took a drink from his cup of hot milk. Don't lose heart. The men on the front lines are still fighting. If it's rough going for us, it'll be even tougher on the 12 tribes of Bian Sha. Amor still hasn't become their great king. Out of the 12, only 6 tribes have truly pledged allegiance to him. The remaining tribes are merely hoping for a share of the spoils. They'll take the risk with him for now. But when it comes down to it, they may not be willing to stake everything on him. Bian Sha has the momentum this year, Zhao Hui said. They've surely come prepared. No doubt they've been planning this push for a long time. Zuo Qianzhou turned his palms over and looked down before continuing. In the 3rd year of Xiande, Amor colluded with our own ministers and broke through Zhongbo's defenses. Everything went too smoothly for him then. He had a true taste of victory. It's surprising that he's concentrating his attacks on a difficult territory like Libe. But from this, we can guess he's harboring real intentions of invading Great Zhou. This time, he wants to first destroy the wall that is Libe, to prevent himself from getting caught the same way. Someone out there is supplying grain to Amor. Xiao Fengshu's eyes were sharp. When Ji Ming was taken out of commission thanks to the moldy provisions, Amor transferred Ha Sen north immediately. If you told me he didn't know in advance, I wouldn't believe you. Amor's contact is still hiding in Great Zhou. We can thank our lucky stars Chudu doesn't have Libe's military maps. Aye rebelled at the start of spring. This was no bad thing. In fact, he did well. If Libe had remained under Chudu's control, we'd be worrying about more than provisions right now. It's easier to dodge a spear in the open than ward off an arrow in the dark. And trusting our backs to Chudu is too dangerous. Zhang Sheng finally revealed a hint of a smile, shaking his head. With no more inspector eunuchs breathing down our necks, it's been a much more satisfying fight. The provisions issue is one that can be solved. Xiao Fengshu set down his bowl. And I've found just the man to solve it. Shen Zichuan, I assume. Zuo Qianzhou laughed and rose to his feet. All right then, let me invite this young friend of yours in. It took all of Wu Ziyu's discipline not to brazenly stare at Shen Zichuan. Squashing his curiosity, he followed behind Tan Tai Hu and asked, Is that him? Just address him as Gongzi later, Tan Tai Hu whispered back. Shen Zichuan's head was tilted as he listened to Fei Sheng. Wu Ziyu couldn't tell from his side profile if Shen Zichuan was happy or not, but simply standing there, he resembled a portrait limned in brilliant colors. The base was a pure white, yet the delicate hues of his features were so ravishing they held the viewer in thrall. One didn't dare shift their eyes away, but looking too long inexplicably gave one a chill. It wasn't an oppressive coldness, it merely raced up one's spine, so swift it gave no indication of its advance. By the time realization dawned, the viewer instinctively sensed danger and shied away from his cutting brilliance. Ding Tao was, as ever, a chatterbox. He popped out his head to whisper, "See that jade earring? Our master polished it personally. Gongza wears it every day." The jade drop adorned his right ear. Whether Shen Zichuan was the one who became the jade earring, or whether it became him, was a matter still up for debate. Its presence was a needless warning, its smooth luster concealing Xiao Chie's naked possessiveness, announcing to the world that no one other than Xiao Chie could touch this man. Wu Ziyu had only just burrowed through the crowd. He hadn't yet decided how he should greet Shen Zichuan. But seeing as everyone around him behaved as they normally did, he did the same, his prying gaze warded off by that small white earring. By the time Shen Zichuan arrived to meet with Xiao Fengshu, it was nearing midnight. Chen Yang lifted the tent flap to let him enter. Xiao Fengshu was initially sitting with one leg propped on the other, but when he saw that figure in white step inside, he immediately sat up straight. Then, feeling he was acting too unnatural, he attempted to cover it up by bracing his hands on his knees to appear more imposing as he looked sternly over at Shen Zichuan. And we have art. I love it. Also, I love how Xiao Fengshu even is like getting a little bit flustered. Like he doesn't know how to act in this situation. Apologies for keeping you waiting. Zuo Qianqiu guided Shen Zichuan to a seat. It's a tough journey here. Come, have a meal with us first. We'll talk as we eat. He turned his head and shot Xiao Fengshu a meaningful glance. Xiao Fengshu scrutinized Shen Zichuan. He remembered this face, but the aura that accompanied it was entirely different from the young man he had seen just a year ago. Fine, he thought. He really is damn good looking. Sit, Xiao Fengshu said coolly. Gu Jin served tea, and Chen Yang brought out the food. It was a simple meal. A large platter of lamb stew, tea mixed with fresh milk, piping hot flatbread, and cabbage and other green vegetables commonly seen at the front lines. Shen Zichuan stared at the portions laid out before him. They had clearly overestimated him. Zuo Qianqiu gestured for Shen Zichuan to dig in as he tore into his own flatbread. It's army food, I'm afraid. We wanted to welcome you at the meal, but we've not much to offer, so this will have to do. If we can establish a truce with Biansha next year, we'll host you properly back in the homeland. Shen Zichuan still doesn't know that Xiao Qie, like, came out about him to his family. So, he's about to be confused. Shen Zichuan found this comment strange. He was here to discuss the Libei trade market and the use of Libei's roads. Since Xiao Fengshu was willing to meet him, no matter how he looked at it, their hospitality was perfectly adequate. It's been half a year since we saw each other. When we met in Shudu the last time, you weren't so thin, Zuo Qianqiu said. Is your Shifu well? Shen Zichuan hadn't yet touched the food. He nodded and replied, Shifu has been in good health and leads a leisurely life in Suzhou. He thinks of you often. Before I came, he specially instructed me to deliver a letter on his behalf. He turned back and called, Fei Sheng. Fei Sheng handed the letter over to Chen Yang. As Zuo Qianqiu and Shen Zichuan exchanged pleasantries, Xiao Fengshu sliced off a piece of lamb with a dagger. So you're here to discuss the trade market. That's right, Shen Zichuan replied. I also wanted to speak to your lordship about the roads. Access to Libei's roads will not be granted for free. Xiao Fengshu placed the lamb on his plate. You're welcome to use them as long as you can afford the price. But the trade market is not open to outsiders. If your lordship doesn't permit outsiders to participate in the trade market, it will be left vacant this year. Shen Zichuan tasted the flatbread before continuing. The fighting is intense this year, and the grasslands of the Huiyan tribe that participates in your market have been commandeered by the Hanma tribe. The Huiyan tribe is waiting to exchange their remaining cattle and sheep for grain at the trade market just to get through the winter. If the trade market doesn't open, thousands will starve to death in the snow. The fact that Li Bei is willing to vacate land for the Huiyan tribe to graze their livestock is already a magnanimous gesture, Xiao Fengshu replied. They know we're in a difficult spot this year. He wiped the dagger clean and looked at Chen Zichuan. Do you know what it means to let you into the trade market? It would mean your men would move freely in and out of Li Bei this whole winter. We are at war. If any of the Mount Law bandits who defected to Bian Sha find their way in, are you bold enough to bear the consequences? I'm not. Chen Zichuan looked straight into Xiao Fengshu's eyes. Which is why I will eliminate all possibility of it. I thought that was the end of the chapter for a second, and I was like, that's mysterious. Xiao Fengshu tossed the dagger onto his tray. Don't say things like that to me. I don't believe it. What if I gave your lordship the authority to inspect everything that passes through? Shen Zichuan grasped his handkerchief and slowly smiled. Sizhou will provide the grain, and Li Bei will have the final say over how it's delivered. Do you want an exchange? Xiao Fengshu asked, grave. This still isn't a good deal for you. I want a road. Shen Zichuan raised a finger and drew a line in the air. A commercial trade road that runs through the northeastern territories of Great Zhou. One that will allow Li Bei and Sizhou to establish a long-term partnership, secure sufficient provisions for the Li Bei armored cavalry, and keep the northeast provisions trail flowing smoothly. Xiao Fengshu didn't respond. On the other side of the tent, the flap lifted, and Xiao Qie entered. And that's the end of that chapter. Hold on 1 second, I have to look something up really quick. Okay, so, Shen Zichuan's name, the name Zichuan means to nourish the rivers, and his courtesy name, Lanzhou, means orchid and boat, and the name of this chapter is Boat on a River. I saw that and I was like, I remember seeing the name meanings of Shen Zichuan's name. Hold on a second. So I just had to check, because that's interesting. So we are on page 177 for chapter 163, Boat on a River. It sounds dirty now. Oh no, because Henry said something about Xiao Qie entering flaps. Stop. No. Okay. Shen Zichuan's gaze lingered on Xiao Qie's body, an imperceptible tease. It lasted a split second, so fast Xiao Qie only caught the last instant of it. And what does Li Bei get out of letting you into the trade market? Xiao Fengshu wiped his hands clean. Li Bei doesn't depend on trade for survival. In the past, the noble clans adopted a strategy of making a distant friend while attacking a nearby enemy in order to hold Li Bei in check. Li Bei had no friend on its southern border, leaving it vulnerable and cut off from assistance. I'm willing to connect Zhangbo and Li Bei once more and serve as a buffer zone between Li Bei and Qidong, Shen Zichuan said. Li Bei is in a dangerous, protracted war with Bian Sha. It's safer to have Zhangbo as an ally. Xiao Qie sat down next to Xiao Fengshu. Chen Yang presented him with a new pair of chopsticks, and he picked a piece of lamb off the plate. Xiao Fengshu cast him a sidelong glance, then turned his attention back to Shen Zichuan. Henry, reminding everyone that the word orchid is derived from the ancient Greek word for testicle. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. You are not Shenwei, the Prince of Jianxing. Your words don't represent the 6 prefectures of Zhongbo. You snatched Zhou from Zhou Gui's hands, using the excuse of passing through, and you subdued Luo Mu's Chazhou under the pretext of delivering grain. But King Yi of Fanzhou and Dongzhou, as well as the bandits of Mount Luo in Dunzhou and Duanzhou, are not under your control. Regarding this, Shen Zichuan already had a scheme in mind. Something, Henry, why did I hear Xiao Hongshu? I don't know. There's a lot of names, and a lot of these town names sound similar to. Regarding this, Shen Zichuan already had a scheme in mind. King Yi is a commoner pushed to rebellion by the bandits. Between Fanzhou and Dongzhou, he has less than 30,000 troops. He can't defeat the Biansha horsemen to the east, and he doesn't have the guts to face Qi Juyan to the south. He can only set up a miniature imperial court in Fanzhou and attempt to ally with the bandits from Mount Luo. The man is a paper tiger. He only looks fierce. As for the Mount Luo bandits, they're mired in internal strife. They no longer pose a credible threat to Zhongbo. In any case, neither they nor King Yi will negotiate with Li Bei. Only Zizhou comes with a sincere heart. The trade route between Huaizhou, Zizhou, and Chazhou is already taking shape, allowing Zizhou to bypass Chudu to conduct monetary transactions with Jueshi. If Li Bei needs, Zizhou can cover the operating costs of the entire Northeast Provisions Trail. Xiao Fengshu and Zuo Qianshou thought at the same time, he's filthy rich. As long as the Northeast Provisions Trail was operational, Zhongbo could supply Li Bei with military provisions. Shen Zichuan's greatest assets in Jueshi lay in the Shi clan's businesses. He had been set on using the Northeast Provisions Trail before he ever left Chudu. The military provisions case had brought to light the embezzlement of grain in Jueshi, but it had also shown Shen Zichuan a loophole. In the past, Shi Hongshuan routed grain through the Hezhou waterways and was obstructed by the Hua clan of Dicheng to the north. But now that Shen Zichuan had Huaizhou's cooperation, he could purchase grain directly from Jueshi. On another note, Shen Zichuan said, changing the subject, I had hoped the newly established garrison troops of the 6 prefectures might receive guidance from the Li Bei armored cavalry, and purchase battle steeds from the Hongyan Mountains in the future. This time, it was not only Xiao Fengshu who looked toward him. Even Xiao Xie turned his head. You want to establish a cavalry? Xiao Fengshu's interest was piqued. In Zhongbo? Along the Chasha River? Shen Zichuan took a sip of the hot milk to warm himself. Oh, this is great, because Xiao Xie wanted him to, like, drink the milk from Li Bei, to the point that he tried to send it to him, and obviously it went bad by the time it got to him, and now he, like, actually gets to, like, be there and eat their food and drink the milk. Duanzhou needs a cavalry. Most of Zhongbo had no natural grasslands for grazing. The garrisons of the 6 prefectures comprised mainly infantry. But Zhongbo's terrain didn't enjoy the same natural geographical advantage as Qidong, which relied on the 2 cinch points of Tianfei Watchtower and Suotian Pass for protection. The land along the Chasha River was open and exposed, and the line of defense Duanzhou had established there couldn't withstand the repeated incursion of the Biansha horsemen. The rebuilding of these military defenses was long overdue. My elder brother's name was Jimu, Shen Zichuan said. He was a squad commander in the Duanzhou garrison troops when the Biansha horsemen attacked. He paused. He was familiar with the area along the Chasha River. Like Li Bei, it's a wide expanse of flatlands. The defensive camps there at the time didn't have the beacon towers of the Bianjun Commandery, which stretched for tens of thousands of li, nor did they have the falcon reconnaissance of Li Bei. When the Biansha horsemen forded the river, there was no time for the defenders to pass on any message at all. This was one of the principal reasons for the fall of Duanzhou. The relay horses along the public roads couldn't outrun the Biansha horsemen. They were slaughtered en route to their destinations. With no one to communicate military intelligence, the cities behind Duanzhou received no news. They didn't learn of the attack until the city's gates were broken down, and the Biansha horsemen's scimitars were right in their faces. What had followed was the massacre of the cities. Jimu had died with a grievance. All 30,000 garrison soldiers in the Chasha sinkhole had died unjust deaths. They had possessed the determination to die protecting their home and country, but they'd never had the opportunity. Heavy snow had blanketed the Chasha sinkhole. From then on, the men of Zhongbo had become the stray dogs of the Zhou Empire. Duanzhou needs a light cavalry, Shen Zichun said firmly. After the defeat, the area along the Chasha River fell into the hands of the Biansha people. Whatever was left of Duanzhou's defensive camps lapsed into disuse. To rebuild them, Duanzhou must have a light cavalry. Xiao Fengshu stroked his chin. If you only want to pass military information efficiently, there are plenty of options. Re-establish a dense enough cluster of relay stations along the Chasha River, and build smooth enough roads for the horses, and you can be as swift as you please. But if you want a light cavalry that can rival the Biansha horsemen, Li Bei can't help you. Suo Qianqiu nodded and addressed Shen Zichun. The Biansha horsemen's fierce strength lies not only in their speed, but in their horsemanship. They're adept riders, more so than any of Great Zhou's soldiers. Even the Li Bei armored cavalry cannot compare to them in this. You should know a Duanzhou that relinquishes its defenses is no better than an infant in swaddling clothes. Xiao Fengshu agreed. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Xiao Jie stealthily push the plate of meat toward Shen Zichun. He stomped on his son's foot under the table. Xiao Jie sucked in a breath. I think it's feasible. The hell do you know? Xiao Fengshu grumbled. Xiao Jie twisted his thumb ring around twice. In this case, I do know something. He looked toward Shen Zichun again and felt a subtle itch when their gazes met. He knew exactly what Shen Zichun was thinking. What is Shen Zichun thinking? Why must this light cavalry compare to the Biansha horsemen? Xiao Jie asked. Even if we remove the Li Bei armored cavalry's heavy armor from our horses, we won't achieve the same results as them. He felt a little lethargic after eating his fill. Lanzhou also has the embroidered uniform guard at his command. Using them purely as eyes and ears is too great a waste. But if you paired the highly trained embroidered uniform guard with the best horses, they'd have a chance at breaking through Biansha's defenses along the Chasha River. How many men are there in the embroidered uniform guard? Xiao Fengshu scoffed. On the battlefield, their numbers are like a strand of hair on an ox. The embroidered uniform guard in Suzhou can be expanded. And consider this organization's selection criteria. Not only does Lanzhou have the most efficient intelligence gatherers in Great Zhou, he also has assassins adept in the art of camouflage at his disposal, Xiao Jie said. Are small numbers a shortcoming? Not always. For a light cavalry of assassins, being small in number is to their advantage. Rather than calling them a strand of hair on an ox, call them a steel needle. Use this needle in the right place, and even the Biansha vultures will fall. Henry, you said he has a team of elite homosexuals. Yeah, Blue, a whole army who attacks like Lanzhou thinks. Sounds terrifying. Interesting. Oh. Shen Zichun had been inspired by Xiao Jiming's combat style. Even if he were to establish camps along the Chasha River as a first line of defense, he would still lack a military force that could act as a heavy hammer the way the Li Bei armored cavalry did. As there was no way to replicate the Li Bei armored cavalry, Shen Zichun had swapped the hammer for a needle. In theory, A sufficiently fortified defensive wall could be built, stretching from Dunzhou to Duanzhou. If Shen Zichuan shifted Zhongbo's infantry behind this wall and turned them into bowmen equipped with heavy defensive weapons, then placed a patrolling troop of light cavalry with unpredictable movements along the Chasha River, he would possess a panoramic view of everything inside and outside the wall. The cavalry, or perhaps it would be more appropriate to call them an assassination squad, evolved from the embroidered uniform guard, could swiftly travel undercover and remain Shen Zichuan's eyes and ears on the ground. Silent and omnipresent. For as long as Shen Zichuan desired, he would be able to hear everything, anywhere. My God. See, sometimes the strategy and the politics and everything in this book, I just don't know what's going on. It just takes me a while. And sometimes it clicks and I'm just like, oh my God. Like right now, Zuo Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air. Having been stationed at Tianfei Watchtower for so many years, he understood best how deadly such a squad of assassins could be. The thought was enough to unnerve anyone. Silence descended upon the tent. Everyone was waiting for Xiao Fengshu to speak. At length, he said to Shen Zichuan, "You may trade grain for the horses you want. But if you succeed in establishing this light cavalry, see that they never take a single step into Libei." He pushed his plate away, leaned his elbow on the table, and smiled at Shen Zichuan. "Or I'll kill them and kill you." Oh. Okay. Yeah, he feels threatened by that and he doesn't like that. Okay. His aura seemed to expand and bear down on Shen Zichuan, crushing him almost under an almost tangible weight. Before Xiao Qia could open his mouth to speak, Shen Zichuan pressed down on his arm. He stood his ground against the king wolf's gaze, and in that endless moment, slowly replied, "Deal." Xiao Fengshu bent a finger and flicked the rim of his bowl, retracting his imposing aura as easily as he had let it fall. I see that Xiao Fengshu is very, like... Well, I guess I don't know yet, but I'm hoping that he will kind of separate the politics and just, like, when he interacts with Shen Zichuan on, like, a family level, because that's not very inviting of him, but I have a feeling that he'll, like, turn around and be nice to him when they're not, like, trying to make deals. Yeah, Henry, you said he's dad, and he's also the scariest military commander in all of Great Joe. Also, Blue, is it? Yes. You said Shen Zichuan casually aiming to create the window of heaven, like he's not in the wrong book and written by the wrong author. I saw Window of Heaven on my screen, and I was like, oh, it does sound like that. It really does. After everyone had dispersed, Xiao Fengshu sat by the fire and held his dagger over the flame. "If you regret it," Zuo Qianqiu said, sitting beside him, "it's not too late to take it back." Light from the fire illuminated the planes of Xiao Fengshu's face. "This boy is too dangerous." "You do know who his teacher was, don't you?" Zuo Qianqiu soothed him. "Besides, he's Ji Gong's disciple. He's not bad at heart." "Don't brush me off with that. Even brothers born to the same parents will differ from each other. Qi Huilian wasn't that decent a man either." Xiao Fengshu withdrew the dagger from the fire and caressed the blade with his thumb. Cracks abound everywhere in this world. Opportunities for cunning men to get a foothold. Men like him can't fight battles, yet they'll emerge to stand atop a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. After a long period of silence, Zuo Qianqiu asked, "Then why are you willing to make a deal with him?" Xiao Fengshu looked at the sliding glint on the steel as the firelight bathed it in red. Amid the soft crackle of the bonfire, he examined his own reflection in the blade. Eventually he said, My son has made himself into a lock. So what do y'all think that he means by that? Because I'm getting, like, his son will, you know, stop Shen Zichuan from, he's like a lock that protects Li Bei or something. Like, Shen Zichuan isn't going to hurt Li Bei if he's with Xiao Qie. But is that what he means? Like, him being a lock? I mean, it's a sick line. I'm just kind of like, okay, what does that mean? I might be overthinking it. Yeah, okay, Blue said, whatever Shen Zichuan's goals are, he will not attack Li Bei, and he will also not portray Xiao Qi as morals, I think. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That sounds about right. I think he would only betray Li Bei if Li Bei betrayed Xiao Qi. Shen Zichuan unfastened the clasps on his robe as he faced the candle flame, bone-weary. He hadn't experienced such a feeling in a very long time. It was the frustration of being called on a bluff. Never had Shen Zichuan told anyone about his plan for Duanzhou's light cavalry, not even Qi Huilian or Xiao Qie. Many of his actions in the past had been rooted in impure motives. As long as he got his hands on something, he would exploit it every way he could. He called these his hypocrisies, and they had been even more atrocious before Xiao Qie had come into the picture. That was why he could not, dared not, tell a soul. That is, like, you know how we kind of never get down, like, not never, but we don't often get downloads on what Shen Zichuan is thinking and his, like, internal thought process. And we just got a really big download on that, and I'm not okay. Shen Zichuan loosened his collar, as if that would allow him to breathe. Footsteps sounded outside the tent. Xiao Qie was speaking to the guards. At the sound of his voice, Shen Zichuan stopped what he was doing. Xiao Qie lifted the flap and entered. Ah yeah. Shen Zichuan didn't turn, merely angling his head slightly as he called back to him. Xiao Qie pressed against him from behind. Shen Zichuan melted under Xiao Qie's touch, his earlier dread evaporating. As their noses brushed, the temperature between them rose, so warm they were soon sweating. Shen Zichuan's breath was hot, as if Xiao Qie's kisses scalded him. His expression resembled pain, but the corners of his eyes brimmed with pleasure as he surrendered and lost himself. He was so fond of Xiao Qie's kisses. Xiao Qie took hold of both of Shen Zichuan's hands and brought them behind his back to bind him. He extinguished the candle, and amid the spiraling wisps of white smoke, kissed along the nape of that neck where he buried his own despondency. Damn. And Nape mentioned, we drink to Nape. QJJ is the originator of that. Lanzhou. Xiao Qie savored the sound in his mouth. Without warning, the table was swept clean. Bent over it, Shen Zichuan wanted to reach for its edge to steady himself, but his hands were gripped so tightly he couldn't move. Shen Zichuan tilted his head until he could see the side of Xiao Qie's face. Kiss me, Shen Zichuan mouthed silently. But Xiao Qie did not. He remained where he was, mere inches away, and did not move. What's, wait, what metaphor are we talking about? Anyway, that's the end of the chapter. It's only 3:45. I'm gonna read the next one. Okay, the part about Xiao Qie binding him. because the same way that Xiao Qie is like the lock, he's like bound morally to him. Yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. Right after the, yeah, no, that's so great. I love that. Like, right after the lock thing, getting tied up by him, no, that's... Oh, okay, that's genius. Okay, we're on page 187 for chapter 164, called Sunrise. I'm not ready. There was only a little distance between them. Xiao Qie's hawkish gaze slid from Shen Zichuan's brow to his lips, as he said in a hoarse voice, "Oh, how I love you." Shen Zichuan felt a shiver rise through him. It was the tremble of defeat. In the silence, he was like the captured knight. Even as it spread, it was still tangled around Xiao Qie. The grip on his wrists was too tight, a hold so punishing that all that lay in his eyes was bared to Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie inched closer in a confrontation that held the promise of a kiss. He murmured, "Wicked, I love you." Shen Zichuan felt he was about to be driven mad by Xiao Qie's words. This line undid him time and time again. He couldn't maintain the flimsiest veil of pretense. All that remained of Shen Zichuan was flayed open before Xiao Qie. This was a side of himself Shen Zichuan could not bring himself to face. Yet everything to do with hypocrisy, deceit, and hostility was swept away in that tidal wave of desire. He was panting. To love was to hold nothing back. Shen Zichuan's eyes brimmed with tears as Xiao Qie crowded him against the table. That sensation of being filled surged through his body as he was pushed against the table's edge. He cried out softly as his body clung to Xiao Qie's warmth without reservation. Xiao Qie kept both Shen Zichuan's wrists restrained, eyes fixed on where the curve of his waist led up to his spine like a crescent moon. Taking full advantage of his height, he drove up into Shen Zichuan's lustrous smoothness, thrusting with merciless force. It was as though he wanted to imprint the words, "I love you," into Shen Zichuan's body, branding them into his bones. Henry, you said biting a chunk clean off my laptop screen. That's so real. The jade earring had been polished until it gleamed with a watery shine. Just outside the tent, the boots of the patrol squad crunched against the dirt as they made their rounds. Someone was chatting a short distance away, and the wind was sighing as it roamed the camp. But all of that belonged to another world. None of it belonged to Shen Zichuan. All he could hear was the groan of the table, bumped out of place beneath him, his own cry of climax around him, and Xiao Qie's heartbeat above him. Every single stroke echoed, "I love you. I love you." It was too much to bear. Shen Zichuan was unraveling, his voice and body freed from his control. He trembled, unable to stand firm on his feet, and as moans spilled from his lips, he shifted his restrained hands to extend a single finger, hooking it on a corner of Xiao Qie's robe. This tiny motion dissolved Xiao Qie's heart into a puddle. He dropped a kiss on Shen Zichuan's nape, as though holding him in his mouth. Every one of his motions was fierce, yet there was a startling gentleness in them. Shen Zichuan pressed back against Xiao Qie, his waist stretched taut as a bowstring, while below they were intimately joined. Xiao Qie released his wrists. Shen Zichuan groped for the edge of the table, but he seemed to have already given up, his strength exhausted amid the rocking jolts. Instead, he reached back to hold on to Xiao Qie's arm. A muffled sound escaped Xiao Qie's throat as he leaned down to kiss Shen Zichuan's ear. He seemed to be taunting Shen Zichuan, and at the same time, showering him with praise. A few shining drops escaped the corners of Shen Zichuan's eyes. He closed them, his lashes damp with tears, and with all the self-control he could muster, he called out in a soft and trembling voice, "Ah, yeah." Xiaoqia buried his face in the side of Shen Zichuan's neck. He was overwhelmed, intoxicated, having been teased all day by this evil man who called his name as he pleased, every word an invitation. He took his time, as if he had just woken from sleep and was slow to think, finally responding lightly. Sean. Shen Zichuan turned his face toward Xiaoqia, their breaths intertwining. In a show of near innocence, he called out, like a student only just learning to recite a poem, "Oh, how I love you." So I forgot. Has Shen Zichuan said "I love you" before? Because I was just thinking about that. I was like, is this going to be the first time he says it? And then I was like, did he say it already and I just forgot? Because no, he hasn't said it before. And he copied the way that Xiaoqia said it. Oh, God. Okay, Xiaoqia is responding like us, because it says, Xiaoqia lost his hold on Shen Zichuan's hips. His hands trembled and his throat was parched. He only pulled out with difficulty. He scooped his Lanzhou off the ground and strode the few steps to the edge of the cot, where he laid him on his back. He grabbed Shen Zichuan's hands to pull him closer, kissing him deeply, before driving in again. I guess, as in many Danmei, refractory periods are non-existent. They had to be face to face to let their eyes take in all the best and worst of each other's expressions. Xiaoqia pushed Shen Zichuan's damp hair aside. There was no space between them. Even their imperfections fit perfectly together. They tangled their limbs under the blanket of night, indulging to their heart's content, their sweat-slick bodies clinging endlessly amid the howling winds of the battlefield. And there is a scene break. Before the break of dawn, Xiaoqia was awake and carrying Shen Zichuan on his back, making their way through the frost-covered grasslands. It's taking so long. Shen Zichuan gathered his fur collar around him and pressed himself closer against Xiaoqia's back. Voice muffled, he said, "Start running." "You want to tire me out?" Xiaoqia hitched him up on his back. Shen Zichuan pulled the little braid from under Xiaoqia's collar and held it gently between his fingers. "I'm tired out." Did you... Henry. Walking fast, faces past. Don't know. I'm gonna get that song stuck in my head, and then I'm gonna think about Xiaoqia and Shen Zichuan to the sound of that song. Someone needs to make the edit. Also, that song, that makes me feel old, because I remember seeing that music video on TV when music videos were, like, actually on TV. Oh, goodness. It was still very early, and the mountains to the east blocked out the edge of the horizon. The wind blew fierce, and the two of them were covered under the same cloak. They had walked out of First Sand Camp before daybreak. A small watchtower to the north had fallen into disuse, and it was there that Xiaoqia was headed. When they arrived, they huddled under the cloak atop the old watchtower, facing east as they waited for sunrise. "I thought you'd come to propose marriage." Xiaoqia eased Shen Zichuan's head onto his shoulder. "I'm getting old from all this waiting." Shen Zichuan was sensitive to the cold, and the wind was strong here. He uncurled one finger to lift the cloak higher and burrowed inside, wanting badly to bury all of himself into Xiaoqia's chest and seek refuge from the wind. "I'll come back when you're 80, Shen Zichuan said. "By then, your father won't be able to strike me." Henry, I am sensitive to whatever this yaoi cocaine is. Oh, goodness. Xiaoqia planted his chin on top of Shen Zichuan's head, the cloak between them tickling his neck. You are the prefectural governor. You ought to possess the audacity to elope. He thought a moment, then added, The old man admires you. Did Shen Zichuan truly want a light cavalry of assassins merely to place them on guard duty? A squadron like this would require inhuman self-restraint. It was simply too useful. And how long would it take Shen Zichuan to put together such a squad? Even if he went to the great effort of establishing it, and succeeded, his success would bring them back to the first question. Could this squad stay stationed along the Chasha River? Could Shen Zichuan truly only want to deploy them for border defense? A unit like this was a blade that would kill without restraint. There was a darkness in it that mirrored the other side of Shen Zichuan. Or would, if it wasn't for Xiaoqia. Oh yeah, Vase, you said it just occurred to me that Shen Zichuan would have known Xiaoqia told his family after the sister-in-law gave him the jade bracelets. That's right. What we saw was him looking at the gift and being confused, and then ending the chapter and, like, moving on to other things. But, of course, Shen Zichuan, the genius that he is, and you wouldn't have to be, like, a genius, but, like, of course he would figure out what that meant. I guess it's more like he doesn't know the details of how it happened, but he must know. And I didn't even think about that. But you said blue, but apparently he didn't get it after all. Because he's afraid of Xiaofeng Shu? No, I see. Like, maybe he didn't really get it because he doesn't think that Xiaoqia's father would be inviting of him. And it's like, no, but actually my family, like, accepts you. But he must have known what that meant. Oh, blue, because you said because he was surprised by how people treated him there. Like the meal thing. No, you're right. Okay. Now I'm conflicted. Because he is really smart. But maybe that's such a shocking thing to happen that he would just be like, it can't mean that. I don't know. I don't know. Oh my god. No, I do... My favorite thing about this book, and the thing that also makes it challenging, is that it's not like Tang Ching isn't just gonna tell you something. But like in a very real way, for where it's like you're putting things together along with the people in the book. Where the heck was I? Okay. I still can't process, like, there was a darkness in it that mirrored the other side of Shen Zichuan, or would if it wasn't for Xiaoqia. That's crazy. Xiaoqia pulled the cloak down a little to reveal the nape of Shen Zichuan's neck. Here it comes. Eyes peeking over the cloak, Shen Zichuan looked eastward. Xiaoqia reached over and tilted his chin up. Thick clouds rolled along the horizon, the wind running rampant between the still dark sky and earth. In the next instant, golden rays broke through the gaps, countless arrows of light piercing the layers of clouds. The sun, which seemed to bear a burden of immense weight, emerged from those dark waves, churning the wisps into foam as it rose in all its majesty. The vast expanse of grasslands was illuminated in a heartbeat, sunlight igniting the thin pavement of frost into a carpet of diamonds. Withered grass seemed to roar to life, the wild call of the wind clear and distinct in their ears. Xiao An, Shen Zichuan said suddenly. Xiaoqia poked him on the cheek. Shen Zichuan grabbed his finger, revealing the red marks on his wrists. He seemed to be considering something. Golden waves of brilliance rippled across the sky. As they watched, blue spread out like ink on a sheaf of rice paper. washing the entire canvas of the sky over their heads. Whew! The snow-capped peaks of the Hongyan Mountains rose against the summit of the clouds, where falcons screamed as they circled, cast in dawn's golden hue. Shen Zichun and Xiaoqia turned their faces to the wind. The next gust was so strong Shen Zichun had the illusion he was about to be blown away. But Xiaoqia was a rock bracing him at his back, as he gradually moved to take Shen Zichun's hands. "You can do whatever you want," Xiaoqia whispered into his ear. "As long as I'm here, you'll never fall." Blue, not you mentioning the Titanic moment. Are we gonna associate Titanic with this book too? Henry said, "Screaming like the falcons at this prose." Yep. Yep. Me. That's, yeah. So, that's the end of that chapter. Perfect timing. It's time for me to take a 10-minute break. I don't even want to, but it's okay. We'll be back. I'll be back soon. When we come back, we will be reading chapter 165, which is called Frostfall. All Danmei know is Titanic, nape fucking, eat hot chip, and scheme. I'm sure Titanic, you could find a way to associate Titanic with any Danmei. I'm sure that it's possible. And we're gonna find a way now. I'm gonna be reading whatever the next book is that I read, and I'm gonna find a way to bring in Titanic. And I'm gonna get that song stuck in my head. Okay, I will be right back. I'm gonna... Wait, I just had a... No, I can't do this. Ugh. I can't do it because if I ever get monetized, it would be copyrighted, and I want my... But imagine if I put the Titanic song in the break room for case file. Oh, I can't do it. Okay. Anyway, I'll be right back. Hello, I am back. I saw someone mentioned the Untamed but Weird. Oh, Vase, yeah, you said, have you seen the Untamed but Weird edits on YouTube? I don't think I've seen all of them, but I've definitely seen a few of those. They do feel like, yeah, like Blue, like you said, exactly what crack videos were always meant to be. They do feel sort of like the original, like, YouTube crack kind of thing. Oh, Vase, you were reminded by the flute version of that song. Yeah, I don't remember a lot of those edits. I'd have to look back at them, but, like, it totally makes sense that they use that. I was going to say something. Yes. Okay. The part at the very last page of the last chapter, where it's like, Shenzachuan grabbed his finger, revealing the red marks on his wrists. He seemed to be considering something. We do not find out what Shenzachuan was considering, because he never said it. And now I'm like, what was he thinking about? What was he, like, I don't know, considering saying, or just thinking, or, like, I need to know. We are not going to know. At least right now. Okay. We are on page 193 for chapter 165, Frostfall. Xiaoqie gifted the horse Lu Yizhi had set aside to Shenzachuan. While he still had some time to spare, he accompanied Shenzachuan riding on the grasslands of the war zone. This horse was snow white from nose to tail, with only a small shield of black on its chest. It was beautiful and intelligent, and even more lively than Snowcrest. There were no battles to be fought today. Xiao Fengshu sat on the railing in his armor, and watched Shenzachuan canter around the paddock. He said to Zuo Qianqiu beside him, This habit? Zuo Qianqiu squinted against the sunlight, deciphering a written prescription in his hand. Finish your sentence, man. Sorry, there's something funny about about him phrasing it that way. Finish your, like using man like that. Finish your sentence, man. Reminds me of Ah Ye's mother. Xiao Fengshu raised a finger and traced Shenzachuan's trajectory twice. Can't ride straight. He can't do anything straight. He lived in Chudu all this time. He hasn't had the practice. Just let Ah Ye take him out riding a little more often. Zuo Qianqiu lifted his head. Have you found Yi Deng? The venerable master is elusive. His whereabouts are unpredictable. He's not easy to track down. Xiao Fengshu brushed the dust off the helmet in his hand. Why? We need to get Yi Deng to take a look at the kid, Zuo Qianqiu said gravely. I saw him in Chudu last year. He appeared frail then, but there was no major internal damage. Looking at him now, he's in much worse shape. Xiao Fengshu sized up Shenzachuan for a moment. That's serious? You pay the price twofold for consuming that medicine for as long as he did, Zuo Qianqiu said. He suffered 3 major tribulations, one after the other in Chudu, and what happened to Qi Huilian was a heavy blow to him. The good thing is Ye and Jigong are both paying attention. Xiao Fengshu turned his gaze to Zuo Qianqiu. Can he be healed? Frowning slightly, Zuo Qianqiu folded the prescription and tucked it into his lapels. Tough to say. Let's get a little strength back in him first. Yeah, it is really funny how Xiao Fengshu compartmentalizes things. He can be so aggressive towards Shen Zichuan, but he's like sharing in the concern of his health. An extra bowl of fresh milk appeared on Shen Zichuan's table at lunch. Having no knowledge of the distribution of supplies on the front lines, he merely assumed it was provided on Xiao Qia's instruction. Yes, Blue, I love that they're already worrying about him, but this also makes me nervous. I've been nervous about Shen Zichuan's health and whatever is going on with that for like almost the whole series. In the back of my head, I'm always like, what's gonna happen with this? But later, when Xiao Qia entered, he brought with him yet another bowl of milk. After he drank it, Shen Zichuan's stomach was full. Xiao Qia didn't comment, believing the additional milk was from Zuo Qianqiu. On his way to thank his Shifu, he bumped into Chen Yang coming in to collect the bowl. Is it Shifu's? Xiao Qia nimbly pulled on his outer robe. I'll take it back to him. Chen Yang set the bowl on the tray and lowered his voice. It's the prince's. Xiao Qia's hands slowed. This morning, his lordship told Wu Ziyu to give his own portion to Gongsa. He even instructed border camp to send milk-producing cows and sheep to Zizhou. Chen Yang picked up the tray. He made a special point of telling us not to talk about it or tell Gongsa. This old man. Xiao Qia nodded. Give mine to my father tomorrow morning to make up for it. After a moment's hesitation, he called out to Chen Yang again just as he was ducking under the tent flap. Wait, never mind. I understand. Oh, I love this. So I guess we're not gonna tell Shen Zichuan, like, who's behind it. Hey, it's my father. He likes you, actually. Shen Zichuan couldn't stay in the war zone for long. The weather in the Hongyan Mountains was changeable, and he had to return after only 2 days. On the day of his departure, a heavy fog descended, and the damp wind in the eastern mountain range blew so hard it sent the military banners snapping. Xiao Qia secured Shen Zichuan's coat and wrapped the fur collar around his neck. Seeing Xiao Qia had no overcoat, Shen Zichuan asked quietly, It's about to be winter here. Has the cavalry not been provided with winter attire? My sister-in-law is working on it. Xiao Qia propped himself against the carriage door to shield Shen Zichuan from the wind. You should bring Jigong Shifu to the homeland for New Year's. Shen Zichuan cast a glance over Xiao Qia's shoulder and leaned in to whisper, Can I? Xiao Qia whispered back, Hurry up and marry me to make things clear to my father. Otherwise, we'll look like we're having a secret affair. Okay, we're being told. Shen Zichuan had no idea Xiao Qia had already laid his cards on the table. He did not. Okay. He didn't figure it out yet. I guess it was just too shocking to consider. On hearing this, he nodded solemnly. Your sister-in-law gave me a set of bracelets last time. I'll be sure to bring a gift in return for the new year. I'll be sure to bring a gift in return in the new year. Finding him adorable, Xiao Qia laughed and stroked his cheek. The armored cavalry will escort you back. Write me when you reach Zizhou. I'll return to border camp in another 3 or 4 days. It's closer. I'll write you a stack. Shen Zichuan slowed his speech, as if that would slow down time. I haven't made a new fan for you yet. I was so busy I forgot. Xiao Chia brushed the jade earring with a fingertip. I'll craft you a new one for the new year. I'm off then, Shen Sichuan said. Xiao Chia ducked his head, leaning toward the carriage window. But before he could move in, Shen Sichuan cupped his cheeks and kissed him first. This kiss was brief, a touch lasting a fleeting instant. Xiao Chia straightened up, lowering the curtain and taking a few steps back. Fei Sheng stood off to the side, contemplating how to best ingratiate himself with Xiao Chia. But before he could say a word, Xiao Chia grabbed his neck and hauled him close. Wherever Lan Zhou is, Xiao Chia fixed him with a cold, detached gaze. You'd better be, too. The grip around Fei Sheng's neck was like an iron vise. He nodded breathlessly, and Xiao Chia released him. The wheels of the carriage began to turn. Xiao Chia stood in place and watched it go. Inside, Shen Sichuan tugged the curtain open. The jagged peaks of the Hongyan Mountains behind Xiao Chia were partially veiled by clouds, and the wind howled. In that moment, his silhouette seemed to overlap with that of the misty mountains. Shen Sichuan gazed back at him. Several dark shapes suddenly swooped down out of the wind. Flying at the head of the cast of falcons, Meng let loose a cry that reverberated through the camp. Tents of all sizes lifted their entrance flaps, while a long whistle sounded from the top of the watchtower. When Xiao Fengshu stepped out of his tent, his battle steed was already saddled. He grasped the hilt of his blade for a moment before swinging atop his horse. He boomed, Squad 3, guard the camp. Vanguards move first. Supply squad, pack up and retreat down to Second Sand Camp to protect the craftsmen. Xiao Chia stepped back and put on his helmet, then turned to Mount Snowcrest, who had just trotted over. Shen Zichuan could barely keep his eyes open in the piercing gale. He clung to the carriage door, squinting through the gusts of wind, as Xiao Chia receded further and further into the distance. The clouds dispersed, scattering into millions of snowflakes that danced in the skies of Li Bei. The first snow of winter had come to the battlefield. So, did the Falcons just come down with news that they're being attacked? Are we just like, Shen Zichuan left and it's like immediately time to fight? That's rough. There is a scene break. Ooh. It was pre-dawn hours when Li Jianting opened her eyes. This is someone we haven't seen in a while. She sat up, and the palace maid in attendance stepped forward to pull back the heavy drapes. Feng Chuan, dressed in the official robes of a palace eunuch, nimbly knelt down to help the heir apparent put on her shoes. After Mu Ru had assassinated Li Jianheng, Feng Chuan had found a scapegoat to die in his place. He had then hidden away in the Shui Manor all this while, where he had become Li Jianting's personal eunuch. When Li Jianting came to live in the palace, Feng Chuan returned with her. Shui Xiuzhuo had not initially intended to use him again, but upon Li Jianting's insistence, he allowed Feng Chuan to change his name and remain by Li Jianting's side. He changed his name? Is that something like where you change your name do eunuchs change their name depending on who they're like in service to? Li Jianting slept poorly, unaccustomed to the massive imperial bedchamber. All the palace maids serving the heir apparent knew Li Jianting permitted only Feng Chuan to serve in the hall at night. As they waited in the outer chamber, they occasionally heard the sounds of her cries, trapped in the throes of a nightmare. Everyone in the bedchamber stepped softly as they helped Li Jianting dress in silence. When she was appropriately attired, Feng Chuan bowed and stepped forward, lifting his sleeve to affix the flower embellishment on her brow. Pastels and whites did not suit the heir apparent. She was best adored in scarlet reds. Oh, wait. Oh, Vase, didn't he change his name because everyone thinks he's dead? Oh my god, I'm okay, that makes sense. There are things I cannot keep track of what happened. By sunrise, Li Jinting was waiting under the eaves for the various officials participating in the classics colloquium to arrive for their lectures. It was windy today, and Feng Chuan covered her with a cloak before standing to one side to shield her from the wind. The cold slowly turned his lips purple. Li Jinting glanced at Feng Chuan. It's already autumn. Didn't the Caps and Kerchief Service issue new coats? The Caps and Kerchief Service. There's really a service for everything. Feng Chuan was not permitted to look at Li Jinting directly. He turned slightly to her and answered, "They did, Your Highness." She raised a finger to touch her own cloak, but she understood her every move was being watched. It would be inappropriate indeed for her to undress for a eunuch, and make fertile ground for gossip. She raised her eyes toward the upturned eaves shrouded in gloom. In the end, she didn't say a word more. Perhaps there had been some great delay on the way here, because the officials were notably late to arrive today. Li Jinting stood until her legs went numb. She looked toward Feng Chuan again. This time, she saw his ear peeking out in the dimness. Feng Chuan thought Li Jinting was restless because she was cold. This subject shall send someone over to take a look. Your ear is pierced. Li Jinting gazed fixedly at his earlobe. Feng Chuan's eyes shot toward Li Jinting. His fingers twitched. He instinctively wanted to cover his ear, but instead he lowered his gaze and nodded. Cautiously, he slowed his breathing. He found this tiny hole in his ear a nightmare. One that made him gag and amplified his panic every moment under Li Jinting's silence. What is the story behind him getting an earring? God, like, that doesn't sound good that he finds it that way. Also, Blue, you said, interesting that we're directly paralleling this to the last scene again, with Shen Zichuan asking Xiao Qia about his coat. That is interesting. I was thinking about how this is a parallel, and I was like, what does that mean? At length, Li Jinting spotted a eunuch leading the officials toward the eaves. She inclined her head respectfully and waited for them. Head bowed, she said softly, "It looks nice." As he stepped forward to hold the curtain for the officials, Feng Chuan threw a swift glance at Li Jinting. But she didn't look at him. It was as if she hadn't spoken at all, as she raised herself from her bow and followed her teachers inside. The fists Feng Chuan had hidden under his sleeves were clammy with sweat. He retreated to one side of the door, and only after a long time did he take a stealthy peek inside. Through the gaps in the door curtain, he saw the rippling hem of Li Jinting's skirt, and felt bewildered by her words. Wonder why her words are bewildering to him. Just saying that the earring looks nice, because I assume whatever feeling he has about the earring, she can't know about what it means to him, I would think. That was... Okay, there's another scene break. We're back to Shen Zichuan. I'm just sitting here like, what was that about? Tell me more. Shen Zichuan's return journey was a slow one. The roads were difficult to traverse in rain and snow, and Fei Sheng took utmost care for fear Shen Zichuan would fall ill along the way. He attended to everything personally. Even with the Li Bei armored cavalry escorting them, the embroidered uniform guard still rode close beside the carriage, and Fei Sheng supervised the daily brewing of Shen Zichuan's medicine himself. The carriage came to a stop shortly after passing border camp. Mudslides had damaged the roads ahead, and repairs would delay the journey by a day. The troops would have to spend the night under the open sky. Shen Zichuan stepped out of the carriage and brought Ding Tao along to walk his new horse nearby. Henry, that was something I wondered about. You said my first thought was they have some forbidden love thing going on that will be a foil to Suzhou, but I have no clue. I forget how old Li Jianting is. I think Feng Chuan is young, but I don't know if he's that young. And she's really young. So I was like, I don't want to think about that. But, like, I don't know. But, like, the paralleling is strong. Wait, she's 18 now? Why did I think she was younger? Is that... Okay. Maybe I'm... Okay. Isn't she? I don't know. For some reason, I thought she was, like, still a kid. Like a younger teenager or something like that. I know Feng Shuan is young, but, like, still an adult. I just thought she was still a kid, but I could have my memory could be wrong. I guess it would be somewhere in book 3. I'd have to look for that information. Yeah, Blue, you said, I wonder if there will ever be a female character in this book that I can immediately figure out. Love the complexity, but gosh. I mean, I love that. Like, they're so not tropey. And it's great. Has Gongzi thought of a name yet? Ding Tao asked, walking backward and lacing his fingers behind his head. Frostfall. The name of the chapter. Shen Zichuan stroked the horse's mane as he led it along. Understanding at once, Ding Tao clenched his fist. What a great name. It goes perfectly with Master Snowcrest. I love how Ding Tao is like, he gets it. He knows. Snowcrest and Frostfall. Shen Zichuan looked southward. Ding Tao turned to do the same and commented, Dunzhou is 8 or 9 days' ride that way. So close. Shen Zichuan hadn't realized. I don't see any Li Bei relay stations around here. There used to be some, but they were abandoned. Everyone has gone northeast to fight Biansha. Shen Zichuan's breath came out as a white cloud in the cold air. He turned his gaze away and strolled a while longer with Ding Tao. After dark, Fei Sheng led the men on overnight duty. He sat alongside the men from the Li Bei armored cavalry and warmed himself by the campfire, hunching his shoulders against the cold. It's seriously freezing up here. Li Bei has not even entered winter, yet there's already snow in the war zone. It can't be easy on my brothers here. Have some more meat. One of the accompanying soldiers was a brigade commander. He didn't stand on ceremony with Fei Sheng, and sat around the fire with the rest of them, helping himself to the meat. Snow in Li Bei always comes early. Usually we'd be going home around this time, leaving just a few battalions to guard the frontier. I don't think the war will stop this year. Fei Sheng accepted the flask of on horseback and took a few mouthfuls. The burn made him exclaim with satisfaction. If it wasn't for you all holding the fort here, all the prefectures down south would suffer. It can't be helped. The brigade commander's face was ruddy with food and wine. We're the Li Bei armored cavalry. Everyone says the Li Bei armored cavalry is the iron bastion of the north. All of you are true steel-boned warriors, Fei Sheng said with feeling. I always admired the armored cavalry, even back in Chudu. Han Chung, that old dog, was jealous when he saw Li Bei had the emperor's favor. He never stopped spouting bullshit. I couldn't stand to listen. I told him off multiple times. Well now, here I am in Li Bei. And it turns out I was right. All my brothers here are real men worthy of befriending. If any of you come to Zizhou on missions in the future, don't worry about a thing. The minute you get off your horse, go right to the prefectural yamen and give them my name. I'll make sure everyone here is taken care of. Thrilled, the brigade commander patted Fei Sheng on the shoulder. A worthy friend, indeed. Everyone had a merry time chatting and feasting, warmed by the fire that burned all night to ward off wolves that might be lured in by the aroma of cooking meat. The Libe armored cavalry sent a patrol squad to make a few rounds in the vicinity. When they returned, one of them leaned over and said a few words in the brigade commander's ear. The brigade commander wiped his mouth, no trace left of his jovial expression. Armor on. Fei Sheng was on his feet in an instant. The embroidered uniform guard behind him were wide awake as well. Shen Zichuan had yet to retire. He sat in the carriage, reading the latest letters from Suzhou by candlelight. Hearing footsteps, he asked without raising his head, "Is there someone nearby?" Hand on the hilt of his blade, Fei Sheng stood at the window and spoke quickly. Li Bei's night patrol found traces of carriage tracks south of us. Master, we're close to border camp. When the camp was attacked back in the 6th month, the catapults came from the south. Although Fei Sheng was always talking, his observation skills were unimpeachable, and his intelligence gathering was first-rate. While he didn't possess Ding Tao's eidetic memory, he retained every detail of documents he laid eyes on. He wouldn't let any clue slip by him. Let the armored cavalry lead the way. Shen Zichuan donned his cloak and disembarked. Whoever it is, send someone to tail them. Don't alert them to our presence. Fei Sheng grunted affirmation. Shen Zichuan looked up at the starry canopy overhead, then turned toward the south. The border of Duanzhou is just south of here. If we run into a Biansha supply squad, it's very likely they took a detour north from Duanzhou. Fei Sheng crouched and studied the mud at his feet for a moment, then stood back up. It snowed just a few days back. The roads here have fallen into disrepair. It's not a smooth ride. If they're transporting supplies, they'll be heavy, enough to slow them down. They'll likely have arranged for a large number of armed escorts. Follow them. Shen Zichuan thought for a moment. The carriage can take up the rear. We'll take the opportunity to visit Duanzhou. The Prince of Jianxing's manor was in Duanzhou, Shen Wei's former seat. Not daring to make wild guesses, Fei Sheng turned to give orders to the men, then extinguished the campfire, wiping out all traces of their presence, before following the armored cavalry under the cover of the night. What's going on? That's the end of the chapter. Yes, I am indeed reading 2 more chapters today. I think they're pretty short, but we might go over time a tiny bit. There's been a lot to pause and talk about on this stream. So we're on page 203 for chapter 166, which is called Liu R. Early the next morning, Shen Zichuan stared at the mess of footprints on the path and asked Fei Sheng, was it a grain wagon? The wheel tracks were distinct in the mud, a clear sign that whatever passed had been carrying a heavy load. Whatever they're carrying is heavier than grain. Fei Sheng dropped to one knee and scrutinized the tracks. I guess heavy weaponry. Master, they went to the trouble of sneaking into Li Bei from the south. Could they be planning another raid? 3rd Sand Camp is now well-equipped and well-trained, with Guo Weili as their commander, and Border Camp isn't far off. Without a large number of troops backing them up, a raid won't do them much good. Shen Zichuan turned toward the south. Besides, if they came from Duanzhou, it's possible they're thinking of transporting supplies to the border along the Chasha River. But what supplies were there in Duanzhou? Duanzhou's granaries had long been scraped clean by the bandits. What was more, there were no garrison troops in Duanzhou to stop a small troop of Biansha horsemen, if that's what this was. So why bother with an unnecessary detour north? Shen Zichuan thought carefully, sifting through everything he remembered about Duanzhou. He recalled the Biansha horsemen had used catapults when they raided border camp in the 6th month. Taking a few steps along the wheel tracks, he said, Military supplies, provisions, armaments. He turned back to Fei Sheng. After the fall of Zhongbo, the Ministry of War didn't reclaim the armories of the 6 prefectures, intending to leave the equipment for the re-established garrison troops. But Chudu was negligent in their supervision, and eventually these armories and their contents were forgotten. Fei Sheng stood, not bothering to brush the mud on his knee. There should have been plenty of siege engines among that equipment. If they fall into the hands of the Biansha horsemen, Duanzhou will be in imminent danger. Don't let them out of your sight, Shen Sichuan said. Someone tell me what a siege engine is. Is that, like, related to operating a catapult, or is that something else not catapult related? I'm concerned. And there's a scene break. Okay. Liu R. The horses strained against their traces, trying to pull the wheels free of the mud. Liu R, wrapped up in a coat and wearing a brimmed Biangu hat, was attempting to curl up against the cold to sleep. He didn't succeed. The Biansha man with him, disguised as a traveling merchant, yanked him off the wagon by the ankle and whipped him awake. Get up. Push. Liu R yelped and scrambled to his feet, then limped over to push the wagon. He was getting on in age, and his hands shook. Someone stomped on his foot, and the pain nearly made him keel over. He was one of many bandits escorting this wagon. All their blades had been seized by the Biansha, and they now toiled under the cracks of horsewhips. Oh, Blue, you said a siege engine is a device that is designed to break or circumvent heavy castle doors. Okay, good to know. Thank you. Following their defeat in Suzhou, the bandits of Mount Law had returned home crestfallen. Rumors that Lei Jingzhe was a spy for the Imperial Army had spread like wildfire, and Mount Law had fractured into over a dozen small strongholds that fought tooth and nail for control. Liu R, Ding Niu, and the others had each formed their own bands, hoping to reclaim Lei Changming's glory and become the next chief of Mount Law. But unexpectedly, another group of bandits, assisted by the Biansha horsemen, had overwhelmed them in Duanzhou. Their main forces were slaughtered, and those that remained were recaptured as the Biansha horsemen's prisoners. Ding Niu had refused to transport grain for the Biansha horsemen and was killed at the end of the 7th month. Liu R, who cherished his life, didn't dare resist after that. He was now part of the Biansha troops' specialized escort for grain transport. Have we met Liu R before? I cannot remember if we have met this particular bandit. This is interesting in that the Biansha and the bandits are, like, converging now. It's kind of a double problem. That's concerning. I guess I should have seen something like that coming, but I didn't think about that. Okay, no, so we don't know him. Okay, cool. I did not forget about him. Liu R hunched over like a monkey, his long, drooping eyebrows quivering as he strained and pushed. He heaved with his fellows, not daring to slack off under his captor's eyes. Even so, he didn't escape a lashing. Liu R grimaced in pain and huddled into himself, trying to hide behind others. The wheels were lodged in the mud, and harsh panting filled the chilly night. These bandits, used to riding roughshod over others, couldn't hold up under the repeated lashings. Many were whipped until their skin was flayed open and their flesh tore. The wagon didn't stop until hours before dawn. A few clusters of cavalrymen roamed the vicinity, hollering at the bandits to assemble and stand properly. Liu R's coat had been shredded to ribbons by the whips, wads of cotton spilling out. He wrapped his arms around himself and waded through the marsh, which had a thin layer of ice on it. His robe was tattered, and his ragged trousers fluttered open to reveal a pair of legs like hemp stalks. The old man shivered in the cold. The Bian-cha men sat down to eat, while the bandits were herded to stand to one side to shield them from the wind. Liu R curled his arms up within his sleeves. He was so hungry he was seeing stars. He licked his lips and squatted to take a rest. When will these shitty days come to an end? One of his former subordinates muttered as he untied the cloth sack on his back and secured it around his waist. God damn it, they're gonna whip me to death. These motherfuckers really don't hold back, beating us like livestock. He shifted on his feet. Liu R was so hungry he could taste bile in his throat. Yet he was still thinking of having a smoke. He fumbled in his sleeves for a long time before fishing out some tobacco dust, which he brought to his nose and sniffed hard. They're not educated. That's why they treat people like cattle, no? Those tattoos on their bodies are all raptors and beasts. Hell, they even drink raw blood. The other man spat. Had I known we'd end up this way, I would have given this up and joined the Imperial Army back in Suzhou. Damn it. At least I wouldn't have benefited the Bian-cha. Horse shit. Liu R stuffed the tobacco dust back up his sleeve and shot a furtive glance at the Bian-cha men through his fellow captive's legs. We're bandits. What good could come of defecting to the Imperial Army? We'd still be traitors to somebody. They're gonna use these siege engines we're dragging over to fight Li Bei and Zhongbo. Who knows? When all's said and done, maybe even the Emperor and Shudu will be taken prisoner, and we'll have to kneel to a Bian-cha king. Before Liu R could say any more, his former subordinate yanked him up. Legs trembling, Liu R stuck close to the group and stood ramrod straight, not even daring to move his eyes. The Bian-cha man leading the group was called Ji-da. His head was clean-shaven, and his exposed muscular bicep was tattooed with a scorpion. He wiped his mouth as he passed them, and the look in his eyes made Liu R's legs tremble harder. He was ready to piss his pants from fright. But Ji-da didn't give them any trouble tonight, merely leading his men to the front where the supply wagon carrying the ballista was parked. The Bian-cha were all keenly interested in these massive siege weapons. The bandits remained resting where they were. All their dry rations had become soaked and musty. Liu R still ate it all with his tobacco-stained teeth. A handful of them huddled together to keep warm. Fortunately, it didn't rain, or there would be more than a few freezing to death tonight. They sat on the ground, afraid to sleep. But Liu R was old. Gradually, it became harder for him to stay awake, and he dozed off, leaning against the wagon wheel. And there's a scene break. Shouldn't they have brought more troops? Fei Sheng squatted down once again and examined the footprints. Most of these tracks belong to the bandits pushing the wagons. There aren't that many Bian-cha horsemen. With his helmet on, the brigade commander sitting atop his horse looked like a cast-iron statue. His voice came out deep and muffled as he pulled his horse's reins. They don't want to draw any attention. They probably have agents planted on Mount Law. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare penetrate this far into Great Zhou with so few people. He turned to Shen Zichuan. Governor, if you want to find out who they're working with, we have to capture and interrogate them before they enter Mount Law's territory. Their escort from the Li Bei armored cavalry wasn't large, but every man was a battlefield elite who'd fought the Hanma tribe alongside Xiao Fengshu. With the embroidered uniform guards' assistants in battle, and the dark, frosty night as cover, intercepting the Bian-cha party should pose no problem. Shen Zichuan peered into the night. Ding Tao, you stay here. Fei Sheng, go with the Li Bei armored cavalry. There's another scene break. We're cutting back and forth. Liu R was awoken by the bitter cold. He rubbed both feet, feeling he might really freeze to death. Excuse me. He looked up at the Bian-cha horsemen crowding around the ballista a little distance away. One man's strength was not sufficient to draw this crossbow. Usually, it would be situated at the rear of a battle formation or placed on the walls to defend cities. It was a formidable weapon in combat and a familiar sight in Li Bei's camps. The Bianchao horseman had taken quite a few beatings at its hands. Moving silently, Liu R felt his way along the ground with his hands and used the wagon as cover to make his way to its back. Then he crawled beneath it, ducking as low as possible to hide from view. When he made it to the rear of the procession, he dug his shoes into the mud and sprang forward, a sorry sight as he broke into a run. Ji-da was wiping an arrow when he caught a flash of movement out of the corner of his eye. He shouted in the Bianchao tongue, "We've got a runner." The Bianchao horsemen mounted their horses in seconds, brandishing their whips as they bellowed and chased after him. How on earth could Liu R have expected Ji-da to be so sharp-eyed? To think he still saw him from that distance, and on such a dark night. Liu R considered stopping and attempting to say he was merely taking a piss. But when he looked back and saw those scimitars out of their scabbards, he knew he would die if he didn't make good this escape. Liu R tightened his waist sash and kicked off his shoes in the mud. He fell, then climbed back to his feet. His vision was filled with the image of how Dingnyo had looked when he died. The bandits had been able to call themselves kings on Mount Law because of the Bianchao horsemen, and now it was because of the Bianchao horsemen that they had become prisoners. Liu R muttered unintelligibly, pleading with all the deities and Buddhas he knew. The sores that had formed on the old man's soles made him grimace in pain. He was terrified of death, so afraid he wanted to drop to the ground right there and beg for mercy. But the shouts and curses of the Bianchao horsemen made it clear they weren't looking to recapture Liu R. They had no lack of hands. What they lacked were poor fools they could make examples of. Liu R shuddered as he fell into a mudhole. The Bianchao horsemen surrounded him, and Liu R burst into tears. He raised both hands in surrender and felt his bladder empty itself in the cold, muddy water. Warm urine soaked the legs of his trousers. Unable to understand the Bianchao tongue, Liu R merely kowtowed to the cavalry in terror. "I'm sorry," he wailed hysterically. "Don't kill me." The Bianchao horseman coughed, then spat thick globs of phlegm into Liu R's face. They smashed their scabbards down on Liu R's back, sending him sprawling flat in the mudhole, mouth full of filthy water. Scimitars lifted both his long, drooping brows, and he swallowed the water in fear. Laughter and sobs spilling hysterically from him, as snot and tears soiled his face. Ji-da stood in place, and watched the cavalry amuse themselves with Liu R. He kicked away the fabric cover of the ballista, then shouted for his men to drag Liu R out, so they could test the huge crossbow using the old man as a target. Oh god, oh dear. The sound of the wheels turning scared Liu R out of his wits. His legs dragged against the ground as they hauled him away. He slapped himself on the cheeks with both hands, cursing, "Why the hell did I run?" Liu R slapped himself until his cheeks were red and swollen. His captors hoisted him up and hung him from a tree branch a distance away. Bent over at the waist, Liu R took in huge gasps of air as he watched the cavalry load the ballista with a bolt as thick as a child's arm. Its arrowhead was unusual, with a rounded edge, forged from iron. When such a bolt descended from the sky, the impact would send brain matter splattering over the ground. The gears clicked as they turned. Once Ji-da pulled the trigger, Liu R would watch that arrow soar up into the sky before hurtling down to impale him. His mouth moved soundlessly. Then, with an unexpected burst of courage, he bared his yellow teeth and cursed, "Fuck your ancestors. Fuck all of your ancestors." Tears streamed down Liu R's face. He choked on his sobs, as if he might breathe his last at any second. He'd always been a bandit, but he hadn't been rootless. He'd had a son and daughters back at home, and his wonderful wife had been his childhood sweetheart, who had followed him out of their village. Only when both husband and wife were past their prime had they been blessed with 3 children. Of them, Two were daughters who'd had matches made for them in the 3rd year of Xiande. They were to be married in spring that year. His son had wanted to be a soldier. Liu Er had spent ages buttering up Lei Chongming before he finally managed to get his son entry into the Duanzhou garrison troops. In the end, the entire garrison had perished in the Chasha sinkhole that year, just before the Biansha horsemen razed the city. Woof. That's the end of the chapter. Are we getting more of this? Do we find out what happens? We're on page 211 for chapter 167, which is called Guest. The sky was dark, devoid of stars. Liu Er huffed white puffs of steam. He could no longer tell if he was dead or alive. He hung like a piece of cotton wadding in the wind, light as a feather. Ji-da struggled to trigger the enormous crossbow. He shoved away the subordinates beside him to check on the weapon himself, barking a stream of questions in the Biansha tongue. But his subordinates were unfamiliar with such heavy weaponry. They called for a few bandits to examine the device. Ji-da unscrewed his water skin to take a drink, as he stood bare-chested in the chill night air and waited. Fearing he would be subjected to the same treatment as Liu Er, his former subordinate lay prone on the ground, not daring to move a muscle. He stared at the muddy water in front of his face and noticed subtle tremors coursing through it. Thinking it was caused by his own rapid breathing, he raised both hands to cover his mouth and nose, but the tremors didn't stop. If anything, they became even more pronounced. Ji-da was the first to sense something amiss. He lowered the water skin and listened intently. Then he threw the skin onto the ground and shouted, "The armored cavalry's here." But it was too late. Under the cover of darkness, the Libe armored cavalry had been creeping forward for half the night. Now, like a tiger, they pounced. The wagon beside Ji-da overturned with a loud crash. The startled horses whinnied as the wagon, weighing hundreds of caddies, dragged them to the ground. The mounted crossbow sent up a wave of mud, and the wagons beside Liu Er's former subordinate shifted along the slippery ground. The heavy supply wagons collided haphazardly, and chaos erupted as both men and horses were thrown off their feet. Ji-da backed away from the mess, still calm as he shouted, "Mount your horses." The Libe armored cavalry's battle steeds wore full body armor, and the sound of their hooves as they drew nearer was like thunder to the ear. Encased in iron, the armored cavalry had no fear of the scimitars. They were like a dark wall that smashed through the formation of the Biansha supply squad. In iron armor furnished with long, thick spikes at the chest, their battle steeds were unstoppable in a head-on charge. The Biansha horsemen couldn't outrun them. They were knocked to the ground and trampled to a bloody pulp before they could get back up. The brigade commander gestured to Fei Sheng beside him. Fei Sheng, lightly armored on his own horse, circled into position and brought his saber level with the brigade commanders. In one coordinated move, they charged Ji-da, flanking him in a pincer attack. Ji-da mounted his horse, eyes fixed on the brigade commander as if he hadn't registered Fei Sheng's approach at all. He leaned forward, and the pony beneath him broke into a gallop, running like the wind toward the brigade commander. Their horses crossed paths in the blink of an eye. The brigade commander swung his long sword, intending to hack off Ji-da's head, but his swing missed the mark. Ji-da seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Blue, you said, point taken, those who suffer the most from war are the common people, and the suffering doesn't stop once the fighting stops. Damn. Yeah. Accurate. Oh, Vase, your entry in the anthology just posted. What is the anthology? That's so cool. Oh yeah, no, please, go. That's important. That's more important than this. Congratulations. In the next instant, a hammer slammed into the back of the brigade commander's head. His eyes and nose began to bleed immediately from the impact, and his ears rang. Days, you said fancy some magical gay Vikings? Absolutely. His eyes and nose began to bleed immediately from the impact, and his ears rang. That nearly airtight iron armor could weather any blows from sharp weapons, but it had a fatal weakness. It could not withstand this kind of blunt impact. Ow. The brigade commander dropped off the back of the horse and tumbled headlong to the ground. A sharp, shooting pain drilled through his skull. The buzz in his ears was deafening. He tried to crawl to his feet, but his body was trembling too violently. Blood trickled through the gap in his helmet. He couldn't hear his own voice, but he continued to move his lips. Take off your helm. The iron hammer smashed into the back of the brigade commander's head once again. Blow after blow rained down, crushing his helmet, until it was a lump of deformed metal. Blood spilled over the ground. The brigade commander went silent. Jida squatted on the corpse's back and wiped the brigade commander's blood from his scorpion tattoo, then stuck his fingers in his mouth to lick them clean. Contained in his sinewy muscle was a shocking amount of explosive strength. He lifted his iron hammer and locked eyes with Fei Sheng. Fei Sheng felt his hair stand on end. Catching his mood, the horse under him tossed its head in fear. Fei Sheng swallowed with difficulty. Even after years of serving as an embroidered uniform guard, he quailed at the expression in the other man's eyes. This was no ordinary Biansha horseman. Yet this wasn't one of the Biansha's elite forces. They were unlike Hassan's troops who carried nimble pike daggers. Instead, they were equipped with spiked iron hammers. This was a Biansha force that had never made an appearance on the Libe battlefields. Oh, Days, thank you for sending a link in Discord. Excuse me, for sending a link in Discord. But yeah, no, I appreciate you sticking around, but also go do your thing if you gotta do your thing. That's so cool that you're in an anthology. And like I said, Magical Gay Vikings, it sounds amazing, and I absolutely want to read that. The thought was terrifying. A strangled gasp escaped Fei Sheng. If an iron hammer like this were to be delivered to the front lines, the armored cavalry would become lambs at the slaughter. Any advantage they derived from their armor would be instantly negated. Retreat. Fei Sheng yanked on his reins and bellowed. Retreat. They had to get out of here. Fei Sheng turned his mount and urged the horse into desperate gallop. But even this didn't go as planned. This peculiar and treacherous squad was tailing him like a shadow. Jida had clearly fixed on him as a target, relentless in his pursuit. The two parties engaged in a cat-and-mouse chase in the dark. Fei Sheng had finally gotten a taste of the fabled Biansha horseman. The animal beneath him was a fine steed, but it couldn't widen the distance. Jida remained hot on his heels. Jida's iron hammer swung at the back of Fei Sheng's head. Fei Sheng dodged it by the skin of his teeth. His horse was galloping out of control. Fei Sheng had nowhere near the Biansha horseman's skill as a rider, and nearly slipped out of the saddle amid the jolts and bumps. The two parties were already hundreds of paces away from the supply squad, when Fei Sheng realized he stood no chance of shaking his pursuers. But he couldn't retreat either. Jida had already caught up with him. Fei Sheng did not wear the armor of the Libe armored cavalry. The iron hammer wasn't much threat to him. Jida switched back to his scimitar. That crescent moon blade locked against Fei Sheng's Xiaochun saber. Behind them, the squads had converged, fighting at close quarters. Blade against blade, the two men plunged headlong into the sparse forest. Withered branches lashed Fei Sheng's face. He tugged on his blade, but it was ensnared with Jida's scimitar. Yeah, Blue, it's a helmet or not, the hammer to the head is still a threat. I guess it just makes it easier to target the person's head. They're wearing a big helmet? I don't know. Because, yeah, you could just hit him in the head. Their head's unexposed. But I don't know. I guess a sword is better in that case. Jida bared his teeth in a cruel smile as he said in Great Joe's language with perfect pronunciation, "A warm welcome to our guests." Oh, you said, Henry, you said, think of a bell. Yeah. Right, they get crushed by the hammer. Yeah. No, it makes sense. I guess it makes it a little easier for them to get you. It's less about aiming the hammer at the right place, and it's just like, boing. Yeah. Fei Sheng was too preoccupied to retort. Jida leaned forward, yanking his scimitar back, and Fei Sheng's Shochun saber slipped from his hand and went flying. His enemy's horse rammed his from the side, knocking Fei Sheng from the saddle. He rolled to the ground and reached for the short blade at his waist, bringing it up before his face to parry the next blow. Jida's scimitar had fallen along with the Shochun saber. He tightened his grip on the hammer. Relaxing his right arm, he swung the hammer in a loose arc up into Fei Sheng's face. The blade Fei Sheng held crumpled from the impact, and his whole forearm went numb. But he still reacted swiftly, rolling to the side and casting away the ruined blade. He was unarmed as he backed away from Jida. Warily hunched over, Fei Sheng put more distance between them. He steadied his breathing, then made a condescending shooing noise at Jida, as if driving away an unwanted animal. Fully enraged by it, Jida gripped his hammer, but as he swung it up, he felt a sudden weight on his back. Strangling Jida's burly neck, Ding Tao strained to call out, "Big Bear!" Ding Tao to the rescue. Jida grabbed the youth's arm, intending to fling him over his shoulder and onto the ground. Yet before he could, a figure sprinted out from cover and shot toward him headfirst, slamming like a battering ram into Jida's ribs. The Biansha soldier staggered under the impact, and Ding Tao seized the opportunity to break free. Li Xiong had been riding in the carriage these past few days, having the time of his life, resting and eating. Now he flung out both arms and wrapped them around Jida's waist, widening his stance, as if he intended to lift Jida off the ground as one would pull up the trunk of a tree. Jida's hammer swung out and slammed into Li Xiong's back. Li Xiong hung on tight but cried in pain. "Ow! Taozi!" Rubbing his own numb arm, Ding Tao yelped. "Hit him with G-style boxing." Li Xiong loosened his grip and bellowed as he threw a punch at Jida's chest. The force knocked Jida back 2 full steps. Happy with this result, Li Xiong followed up with several more, every blow striking flesh. He recalled everything Jigong had taught him. Puffing out his chest, he looked back at Ding Tao. He can't. Jida smashed him with the backhanded blow of the hammer, knocking him to the ground. No matter how sturdy this lad might be, the blow was more than he could withstand. Fortunately, Li Xiong had reacted swiftly and thrown up his arms to shield his head. Even so, the force of the blow knocked one of his teeth out. Tasting blood, he spat the tooth onto the ground, finally angry. "Blockhead, get up!" Ding Tao yelled anxiously. Unable to get his feet under him in time, Li Xiong was forced to roll out of the way with all his strength. The hammer scraped his cheek and slammed into the ground. Mud splashed over Li Xiong's head, and he spat dirt from his mouth. Thinking quickly, Ding Tao leaned down and stirred the mud with his brush. He gave Li Xiong's shoulder a hard kick. "Go!" Then, with a sudden flick of the brush, he splashed muddy water into Jida's eyes. Jida hastily scrubbed it away, but Li Xiong was already moving. He pressed both hands into the mud and slid forward, attempting to slip between Jida's legs. But he was still too bulky. He only made it halfway before he got stuck. Still, this boy had a one-track mind. He simply had to go this way. As he tried to brute force his way through, he knocked Jida over instead. Ding Tao wanted to cheer, but Jida, having swiped his eyes clear, grabbed Ding Tao's ankle. Ding Tao had come to grief too many times from leaving one foot in reach, and had long since learned to play it smart. The instant he felt Jida's grip, He lifted both arms to protect the back of his head, and closed his eyes as he went limp. The moment he hit the mud, he shouted, "It doesn't hurt. I'm fine." And now you said, and now we're in a comedic hero anime, and I almost threw my water bottle over. Okay. We're in a comedic hero anime, or a Looney Tunes scene. Trust the babies. Li Xiong climbed to his feet in the muck, and lunged for his enemy's neck. Jida, already on guard against chokeholds, rammed his elbow into the bridge of Li Xiong's nose. Instantly, Li Xiong felt a burning pain. Jida's next blow sent Li Xiong flying into the mud, blood streaming from the youth's mouth and nose. Jida rolled his shoulders, cracking his joints, as if to indicate that the blows they'd exchanged were only a warm-up. The real fight started now. His arms were far burlier than Li Xiong's. As Li Xiong sprawled in the mud, hand over his nose and mouth, he caught a blurry glimpse of the poisonous scorpion inked on Jida's arm. Before Ding Tao could react, he felt himself lifted upside down by the ankle, brush and notebook slipping out of his lapels. Jida swung him up with all his might, sending the poisonous needles and secret weapons he carried tumbling out next, as well as a little oil paper packet. Ding Tao scrambled with both hands to grab it, to no avail. "My candy!" Blood rushing to his head, Ding Tao saw the paper-wrapped candies fall into an open hand. A gust swept past them, and a flutter of white sleeves descended on the muddy ground like a piece of drifting snow, arriving with the wind, then swirling up into the air once again. The cold glint of avalanche was just like the crystal ripple of autumn waters, as it arced toward Jida's chest, almost too fast to see. Henry, you said, "Oh, the eye candy." Jida had nowhere to retreat. He cast Ding Tao aside, attempting to free a hand to grab hold of Avalanche's tip. But even this was too slow. It took only an instant for the blade to reach his chest. Jida failed to grab hold of it, and Avalanche flicked up with the swish of white sleeve to slash toward Jida's throat. This time, Jida twisted to dodge, taking the blade in his shoulder. Master! Alarm bells went off in Jida's head. But in the next moment, it dawned on him. Though this man had descended with the force of a thunderbolt, his first blow earlier had already exposed the hollow frailty of his constitution. Jida's mouth twisted in a sardonic smile as his hand chopped toward the side of Shen Zituan's neck. As the white robe danced out of the way like a misty cloud, he closed in and balled his hands into fists to block Shen Zituan's next attack, before grabbing Avalanche's blade with the twist of his wrist. With Avalanche trapped, Jida's other hand shot out to catch hold of Shen Zituan's arm. Jida knew this man would be a slippery target. He steadied his feet and seized his golden opportunity, turning and lowering his stance to throw Shen Zituan over his shoulder and onto the ground. Shen Zituan nearly spat blood at the impact. He got back to his feet, but couldn't break free of Jida's grasp. Sharp cracks rang out as his free hand shot out to trade 2 blows with Jida, who warded them off with sheer brute force. Jida wasn't meticulous in his study of martial arts, and didn't want to waste more effort on Shen Zituan. As he parried the blows, he sensed Shen Zituan had already abandoned Avalanche. The instant Shen Zituan sprang up again, he swung his hammer. The hammer smashed into a tree trunk, but he'd used too much force with this blow. He couldn't pull it back out. Shen Zituan was slightly shorter than his assailant. As he looked up, his pitch-black eyes locking onto Jida, Jida heard the crack of something snapping. Long before he identified the sound, he sensed the acute danger. He abandoned his hammer. Before he could make another move, Shen Zituan was striking out with unfathomable speed and power. This time he was much faster than before, as though he had been planning this since the beginning, luring Jida into a false sense of security. Jida suddenly suspected Shen Zituan wasn't injured at all, that his frailty before had been an act. But Jida was out of chances to think. Hot blood spewed from his neck, spraying Shen Zichuan's face. Jida gurgled. Even in his last moment, all he felt was disbelief. He shifted his sluggish gaze and met a pair of impossibly deep eyes. Yes, Blue. Thank you. I was just thinking, yes, we all wonder about his frailty being an act. I still feel like, if he's literally skinnier than he was before, that's a problem, right? Like, you can't put on an act to do that. That's real. But at the same time, what is going on? What is Shen Zichuan not revealing to people? Is he still taking the medication is my thing. The medication that he was supposed to stop taking? Because I thought about that a while ago, and then I kind of put it out of my mind, but now I'm thinking about it again. Shen Zichuan seemed to remember something. Lowering his expressive eyes slightly, he said to Jida in an amiable tone, "A warm welcome to our guests." The moment the words were out, Jida toppled to the ground, half a broken paintbrush sticking out of his throat. Ding Tao was badly shaken when Shen Zichuan dropped the packet of candy into his hand. He caught it in a daze. The oil paper was red with blood, the scarlet having seeped all the way through. That's the end of the chapter. That's where we stop for today. That, every time I'm just I feel like Tang Do-ching can't outdo herself. And then she outdoes herself with the fight scene. Because seriously, the fight scenes, even when it gets a little bit goofy, it's I can see everything happening. And I'm notoriously bad at, reading a fight scene or reading something that describes, motion. I'm very bad at, spatial awareness. And I read these fight scenes, and I'm I can see it happening. That does not happen to me with, almost anything. So it's crazy. I don't know how she does it. Okay. Well, that's the end of the chapter, and when we come back in a whole week, next Wednesday, we will be on chapter 168, which is called Scorpion. Maybe we'll learn more about, the significance of the scorpion tattoos. Yeah, Henry, you said I'm also usually bad at tracking them, but this feels like clear visuals and movements and not tracking stray limbs here and there. Exactly. At least we finished the fight. No cliffhanger. Very good. I'm glad about that. But yeah, Henry, you said, I think he's pushing himself past what his body can handle, which looks cool for now. It could be not the medication, but just that. I really don't know. I just feel like there's something going on. Yeah. Blue or Henry, you said something. Where was that? Yeah, Blue, you said, I love how we can't even figure the damn protagonist out. That's the thing. This book starts with Shen Zichuan's perspective, book one. And we're okay, he's the protagonist. And I guess ostensibly Shen Zichuan is the protagonist. But, Xiao Qie sometimes feels more like the protagonist because we actually see a lot more inside his head. And Shen Zichuan is still so mysterious and guarded that it's he feels, I guess, in the standard sense of there's a protagonist and then there's the love interest who's, the second main character, but they're not the protagonist. And that's kind of how it's usually structured, but it doesn't feel like that way in this book at all. Yeah, Xiao Qie is also very protagonist coded in terms of life and personality. Oh, Henry, you said you meant the medication along with the strain. Yeah. No, I'm still worried that he's still taking that. Oh, sorry for knocking the mic. Henry, you said, I think we got a bit more Shen Zichuan's childhood and specific flashbacks that he feels a little more like the protagonist in my head, but I think they both share that role. Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, I would say they're both the protagonists in this because we go back and forth between their perspectives. It's just the way that Shen Zichuan is so guarded to the reader. And you know how, like, it's kind of an I guess it's kind of like an unreliable narrator type of thing, but it feels different from that. Like, rather than being like, things are just completely hidden from us. It's not like we're told one thing and it's really another. It's just like, it just seems like we're just not telling you anything about that. I see. Blue, you said I agree, but Lanjo introducing us to this world still makes him feel like a bit more like the protagonist. Like, he is where we started. So yeah, that makes sense too. It's, I don't know, I just really... I love how much this isn't structured in like a typical way. And I especially love when it's just like they cut to random other characters and you're like, why are we here? And then they cut back to like the action that you were in and you're like, why did we just see that? That's interesting. I don't know. I'm so... Yeah. I wish I didn't have to wait a week. But I'm gonna go and I will see you guys on Wednesday. No, you're right, Blue. I was about to go, but I just saw your comment. Funnily enough, it's structured like a TV show. It is. Maybe that's part of what makes it feel so cinematic. Like, I can see it. It's very like a show. Anyway, okay. Bye. Have a good one.